Today, we're going to be looking at the world of podcasting.
Ooh, fun.
But not from the listener side this time.
Right.
We want to look at how to create a podcast.
Yeah.
One that people will actually crave.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, we have some excellent material from BrightBrain and Castos to help us figure that out.
What I think is really interesting is that we take for granted how easy it is to listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
But creating them,
Right.
it's a whole other story.
It really is.
There's an art and a science to it.
Definitely.
Like BrightBrain kicks things off with a definition, just reminding us that podcasts are essentially on-demand audio shows
Yeah.
that can cover any topic you can think of.
Right. And it is like having this massive library of conversations right at your fingertips.
Right, and just think about the freedom that comes with that. Like, you can learn about ancient history while you're on a run,
Mm-hmm.
or you can dive deep into astrophysics while you're doing the dishes.
Exactly. And
Okay.
BrightBrain is spot on when they emphasize that accessibility factor.
Yeah, fit into our busy lives so seamlessly.
Now, if you're thinking, okay, I'm ready to jump in and start recording,
Yeah.
hold on just a second. BrightBrain gives us 15 tips,
Wow.
and Castos adds another 13.
Okay.
So that's a lot to consider.
That's a lot of advice. Yeah.
But it highlights just how much goes into creating a successful podcast.
Okay, so where do we even begin with all this advice? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
both sources seem to agree that good audio quality
Okay.
and a consistent publishing schedule
Right.
are absolutely essential.
They both really hammer home that audio quality point.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that so crucial?
Well, think about the last time you listened to something with terrible audio.
Oh, yeah.
Chances are you couldn't wait to hit that stop button. Bad audio is incredibly distracting. In fact, Castos points out that poor audio is even more noticeable when people are listening with headphones,
Yeah.
which is how a lot of people consume podcasts these days.
It's like having someone whisper in your ear, but the whisper is distorted and full of static.
That just sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's not pleasant.
So what are some steps that podcasters can take to make sure their audio is top-notch?
Well, investing in a decent microphone is a good starting point.
Okay.
You don't need a top-of-the-line studio setup, but a clear, crisp microphone can make a world of difference.
Gotcha.
And then, of course, there's the editing process, learning how to remove background noise, balance audio levels, and smooth out those ums and ahs can really elevate the listening experience.
So we've got our audio equipment sorted.
Okay.
Now, how do we even begin to plan out our podcast content? BrightBrain dives into the importance of finding your niche and creating a content plan.
And Castos adds to that by saying, choose a topic you're genuinely passionate about,
Okay.
and then focus on a specific target audience. You're not just creating this podcast for yourself.
Right.
You're creating it for an audience. And the better you understand that audience, the better you can tailor your content to their interests and needs.
I see what you mean. So if my podcast is all about vintage board games, I'm probably not going to attract listeners who are only interested in true crime documentaries.
Exactly. And that's where defining your niche becomes so important.
Yeah.
It's about finding that sweet spot where your passions intersect with the interests of a specific group of listeners.
I like that.
Think of it like this.
Okay.
When you go to a bookstore, you don't just wander aimlessly hoping to stumble upon something interesting. You go to a specific section based on your interests. Your podcast niche is like that section in the bookstore. It helps potential listeners find you.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've got a clear niche, a content plan, and our audio is crystal clear.
All right.
What's next?
Here's where the real magic comes in.
Ooh, okay.
Both BrightBrain and Castos emphasize the power of storytelling. Even if your podcast is about something technical or factual, finding ways to weave those facts into a compelling narrative can make all the difference.
So it's not just about presenting information.
Right.
It's about crafting an engaging story
Yeah.
that listeners can connect with.
Exactly. Remember, humans are hardwired to respond to stories. Stories help us make sense of the world, remember information, and feel emotions.
Yeah.
And the best podcasts are the ones that feel like you're sitting down with a friend and listening to them tell you a fascinating story.
I agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
It's like you're part of the conversation.
Mhm.
And that's how you keep those listeners coming back for more. They want to see what happens next in the story.
I know I've definitely gotten hooked on some podcasts where I just felt like I was part of an unfolding narrative.
Now, BrightBrain also suggests adding some spice to your storytelling
Okay.
with guest variety.
Okay.
Think about your favorite podcasts.
Mhm.
Do they feature the same guest every week? Or do they bring in different voices and perspectives?
Now that you mention it, a lot of the podcasts I enjoy, they have a mix of guests.
Yeah.
It definitely keeps things fresh and interesting.
Exactly. And Castos reminds us that not all guests are created equal.
Right.
They suggest asking yourself 3 key questions.
Ooh, okay.
Is this guest relevant to my topic?
Okay.
Do they have deep knowledge?
Okay.
And perhaps most importantly, are they entertaining?
That's a really good checklist.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we're not just looking for experts, we're looking for engaging storytellers.
Exactly. And speaking of engaging listeners, Castos highlights the importance of creating actionable content. Things that listeners can actually implement in their own lives.
I see. So instead of just talking about the benefits of meditation, maybe you'd guide listeners through a short meditation exercise.
Exactly. It's about giving listeners something tangible that they can take away from the episode.
I like that.
Yeah.
So it's not just entertainment, they're actually learning something and can apply it.
And don't forget about the power of asking questions.
Yeah.
Both sources mention this as a key engagement strategy.
It's so simple, but it's so effective.
It is. A well-placed Christian can spark curiosity, encourage reflection, and even prompt listeners to reach out and connect with you.
Yeah, this reminds me of a point that Brightbrain made about leveraging social media.
Right.
And it's not just about promoting your podcast.
Yeah,
It's about creating a community around it.
absolutely. Think of social media as an extension of your podcast.
Okay.
It's a place where you can continue the conversation, share behind-the-scenes insights, and connect with your listeners on a deeper level.
We've talked a lot about content,
Yeah.
but let's circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
Production value.
Right.
Both sources are adamant about the importance of good audio quality.
They are.
And Castos even compares it to a dinner party conversation.
It's a good analogy.
It is.
Imagine trying to have a meaningful conversation with someone who's shouting across the table
Right.
or mumbling so quietly that you can barely hear them.
Yeah.
It would be frustrating.
It would be very frustrating.
That's why investing in decent audio equipment and learning basic editing techniques is so crucial.
Okay, so we've got our content plan, our guests are booked, and our audio is crystal clear.
Right?
Now let's tap into that wow factor.
Okay, here we go.
This is where our third source, What Makes a Good Podcast, comes in.
Yes.
And they stress the importance of starting with an original idea.
Mm-hmm.
There are thousands of podcasts out there.
Oh, yeah.
So what makes yours stand out?
Right.
What unique perspective or approach are you bringing to the table?
That's a great point. It's not enough to just jump on the latest podcasting trend.
Right.
You need to have a clear vision and a story that you're passionate about telling.
I agree.
And once you have that vision, you need to structure your episodes in a way that keeps listeners engaged.
Okay.
What makes a good podcast suggests thinking about the flow of your episodes like chapters in a book.
So you want to make sure there's a clear beginning, middle, and end
Yeah.
with transitions that smoothly guide the listener from one point to the next.
Exactly. And don't forget about that host-listener interaction we talked about earlier.
Right.
Even though you're not face-to-face, you can still create a sense of connection by addressing the listener, directly asking questions, and responding to comments.
It's like you're having a conversation with a friend,
Mm-hmm.
even though you're separated by time and space.
And speaking of reaching a wider audience, What Makes a Good Podcast highlights the importance of effective podcast SEO.
Now, this is one area I'm not too familiar with.
Okay.
Can you explain what podcast SEO entails?
Sure. Just like websites need to be optimized for search engines like Google, podcasts need to be optimized for podcast directories like Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
I see.
This means using relevant keywords in your episode titles and descriptions,
Okay.
creating show notes that provide additional context, and making sure your podcast is categorized correctly.
So it's not just about creating great content.
Right.
It's about making sure people can actually find your podcast.
Exactly. You can have the most amazing podcast in the world. But if it's buried under a million other search results, no one will ever hear it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about everything from audio quality to content planning to podcast SEO. But let's be honest,
Okay.
is all this effort even worth it?
Right.
Is podcasting really a viable option in today's saturated market?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And thankfully, Brightbrain doesn't shy away from addressing this. They present a balanced view laying out both the pros and the cons of podcasting.
Okay, so what are some of those pros and cons?
Well, they highlight the creative outlet podcasting provides, the potential to connect with a niche audience, and the flexibility of creating content on your own terms.
Okay, those sound like some really great pros.
They are, but they also acknowledge the time commitment,
Right.
the technical learning curve, and the fact that monetization isn't always guaranteed.
That's true.
It's important to go into podcasting with realistic expectations.
Mm.
It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a long game that requires passion, dedication, and a willingness to learn and adapt.
So how can our listener figure out if podcasting is the right fit for them?
Well, they need to ask themselves some tough questions.
Okay.
What are their goals for this podcast?
Okay.
Are they looking to build a brand, share their expertise, connect with like-minded people, or simply explore a creative outlet?
Those are all really good things to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are they willing to put in the time and effort required to make it successful?
I think those are great questions to ponder.
They are.
But before we wrap up, I want to touch on something both BrightBrain and Castos emphasize.
Okay.
The importance of authenticity.
Oh, absolutely. In a world where everyone's trying to be the next big podcasting star,
Yeah,
it's easy to get caught up in trying to sound polished and perfect.
I could see that.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
People can spot a fake a mile away.
Oh, yeah.
The most successful podcasters are the ones who are genuine, relatable, and willing to let their personality shine through.
So it's not about trying to be someone you're not.
Right.
It's about embracing your quirks, your passions, and your unique voice.
Exactly.
And that leads us perfectly into a thought-provoking question from What Makes a Good Podcast?
Okay, I like where this is going.
They ask, what unique perspective can you bring to the podcasting world? It really makes you think. You know,
It does.
we've been talking about all the technical stuff, all the strategies and everything,
Yeah.
but it's that core authenticity
Yeah.
that really resonates with listeners.
It's about finding your voice
Yeah.
and using it to connect with the world.
Mhm.
Sharing your passions, your experiences,
Right.
your unique perspective.
And realizing that your voice does matter.
It does.
Your perspective is valuable.
Mhm.
And there are people out there who are eager to hear what you have to say.
That's the beauty of podcasting.
Yeah.
It's a platform that empowers anyone with a story to tell a message to share
Right.
or a passion to ignite.
It's inspiring to think about all the different voices out there, just waiting to be heard.
And it reminds us that we as listeners have a responsibility
Uh-huh.
to support those voices
How do we do that?
by tuning in, engaging,
Yeah.
and sharing the podcasts that resonate with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every time we hit that play button, we're making a choice
Yes, we are.
to connect with someone's story, to
Yeah.
broaden our understanding,
Yeah.
and to learn something new.
So as you navigate the vast world of podcasts, I encourage you to be mindful of the voices you choose to amplify,
Okay.
the stories that stay with you, and the impact those stories have on your life.
And you know, if you find yourself feeling inspired,
Yeah.
if you have a story burning inside you, if you're ready to share your voice with the world,
Take that leap.
yeah,
Dive into the world of podcasting.
go for it.
Experiment, learn, and see where it takes you.
You never know.
Yeah.
You might just create the next podcast that we feature right here on The Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure exploring the world of podcasting with you today.
It has. Until next time,
Yeah.
keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those microphones hot.